walking the spiritual path in this world is not easy because there's so many other things to do. There's so much on Netflix alone to watch. There's endless hours of entertainment. There are thousands of places to explore just in the city alone. Never mind if you have the means to travel the world. There is many opportunities to have different relationships, different careers to explore, different experiences to have. So it's helpful if we're interested in the spiritual path to understand what our motivation is. What is it that we really want from it? Some people come to meditation just because they want to learn how to unwind and relax at the end of the day. And that's valid. But you can just get an app on YouTube on your phone and do some relaxation exercises. See, to me, that's not really meditation, because meditation changes us at a fundamental level. It actually melts all of our structures within our being and allows us to discover truth. It allows us to know the unreasonable joy and profound peace of being. So that's why I practice, because I know that's real. I've found that, and that's why I teach, is because I want to share that with others. So what I've found is that when people find me, it's because something within them has decided, I've suffered enough. There's this decision, like, life is pretty hard. I've had all these diversions. I've tried all these different things to make my life feel better, to make myself feel more complete or more peaceful. But I keep hitting a wall. I keep finding this suffering, this unsatisfactoriness. There's this sense of quiet desperation sometimes that we don't even admit to ourselves. There's just this sense of we just keep going and going and going, and there's something missing. But when you reach that point, it's a very, very powerful place to be. It feels absolutely horrible. I won't lie. It feels devastating when you fully realize that. This first noble truth of suffering. But the good news is there is a way out. And the way out is the path. So to actually make it off of this endless cycle of suffering, there needs to be a commitment to the path. There needs to be that same decision that brought you to first looking. Sometimes when we actually get on the path and we start practicing, we start meditating every day, twice a day is better. We start training our mind through mindfulness. We start investigating the attachments through contemplation. These are the 3 core principles of Trikaya Buddhism, these practices, these 3 core practices: meditation, mindfulness, contemplation. We start doing these things and we start to feel better. Our life gets brighter. Our mind gets stronger. We find that opportunities that we didn't notice before suddenly open up, and we start enjoying ourselves again. We're like, oh, life is good, life is bright, it's beautiful. Noticing all the things we have gratitude for, we're seeing the beauty in life. And then we get busy again. And then there's lots of distractions. There's like great movies coming out. Like we just saw our movie in the theater, the Christmas movie, Red One. Is that what it's called? Really good Christmas movie. If you haven't seen it. And there's a million other movies, probably a billion other movies to watch, TV shows. There's, again, all these places to explore, all these things to do, all these people to interact with. And we stop meditating. We're like, oh, maybe I'll just, meditate later. And then now it's later and it's like, oh, I'm kind of tired. I'll just go to bed. I won't do it. And then we start to forget about our mindfulness practice. And then we certainly don't have the energy to actually contemplate. We just instead very slowly start to forget, and then we're back in the grind again. Back. Churning. And then all of a sudden we realize that, oh, I'm feeling pretty miserable again. Maybe I'll meditate. So this is how I first practiced. I didn't even know meditation was a thing. I just knew that if I felt absolutely miserable, if I sat and did nothing, everything would just align and then I would feel normal again. And I didn't know what I was doing until I finally met my teacher and then started practicing every day. And this very interesting thing happened when I made that commitment to sitting twice a day, every single day, and then training my mind when I wasn't sitting. Life got better, but then it kept getting better. Things are still hard. I had different challenges, but there was this underlying baseline where when I did get distracted, when I did completely forget to be mindful, instead of going back to how I was before I started meditating every day, I would hit a different point. And I'd be able to catch myself there instead of sinking all the way back down. So even when it feels like nothing's happening, even when you're meditating and you're doing your practice all day long and you feel like you're just stuck on this plateau, if we stay true to the practice, we stay true to our path, there is this very gentle incline that's happening in our awareness, almost behind the scenes. We don't quite realize what's happening. So this is why keeping a journal is really helpful. You don't have to write an entire book, but just getting a notebook and putting a date and recording a few lines about what you did that day, how you're perceiving the world. And then do that, however often feels good, once a week, once a month. And after a few years, it's really fascinating, especially if you're in like a down point where you're like, oh, this meditation stuff isn't doing anything. You go back and you find that journal and you open it up and you start looking at the mind states that you were living in the past. And you start tracking like, oh, wait, wow, I was really limited at that point. And you start to see that, oh, even though maybe I'm at a low point right now, there's this progression that's been happening over time. So again, it's not always easy to be true to your path, but it is worth it. It's so worth it to carve out that time, set your alarm clock, an extra 30 minutes earlier. And if you have to get up really early for work, I know that's really hard, but it's worth it to get up and start your day with meditation. Now, if you're just returning to the path, if you haven't practiced in a long time, then even starting with 5 minutes is great. Even 1 minute if you have to. But try to work up to that 30 minutes. An hour is awesome. The hour is great. But something happens at that 15-20 minute point of sitting, especially if you've been practicing for a while, because we hit this wall where we finally relax enough, the daily thoughts that we've accumulated churn through, and then now we're just left with our focal point. And that's when the path gets really interesting. Because when we can concentrate down to that one single point, both it and we disappear. It's magic. I don't know why it works that way, but some people thousands and thousands and thousands of years ago figured out, like, if we just concentrate on this one point, magic happens. The part of our being that is completely keyed into physical, ordinary consciousness unlocks. And we open to what we really are in that moment, which is beyond words. We discover wisdom. Wisdom is sometimes called emptiness, where we start to see that nothing is fixed. It's all just arising and falling away, arising and falling away. And yet there's awareness of this arising and falling away. And as we go a little bit deeper, we recognize that, oh wow, that's what we actually are, is this awareness. When we sit in the morning, it allows us to charge up with this divine energy, this pure awareness that is not stained or discolored by any of our attachments, any of our structures of how we've built ourselves and our world around us. It's just this pure knowing, this pure awareness. And then we can get up, and then now we're walking around the world and everything looks bright and beautiful and maybe just different. Maybe we don't have a label for it. So right after meditation, right after you stand up, don't rush into your activities. Give yourself a minute or two to actually feel and experience what you're experiencing. You know, our analytical minds want to figure everything out. We want to order it, we want to put it in a box and say, oh, this is why this is, and this is why that is. And honestly, the whys of anything can never be answered. We just create stories to satisfy our ego, and eventually those whys are disproven or expanded upon, and you realize, oh, that's not why that is at all. But what we can do is figure out the what and the how. So meditate and then stand up and give yourself a few moments, maybe stretch your body. Just allow yourself to experience what is. Then we start in on mindfulness, the mind training that happens when we're interacting with the world. And this is this little game of tennis that we play in our mind. So we meditate, hopefully we've kind of shed all the stuff that was weighing us down, and now we're just in this bright, expansive state. And then we pick up our phone and there's an email and there's a problem. Or we walk into the kitchen, there's a pile of dishes, problem. And so the mind all of a sudden gets pulled into a certain state. And any of these mind states aren't really a problem, but we see them as a problem because we get stuck in them. We start to think that's how we are, that's how life is. So we get the email, or we look in the kitchen, see the pile of dishes, and then we look at the clock and we're like, oh, I'm late. And we feel the anxiety of the problem, the irritation, the sense of being distraught. And it shrinks our awareness. We were just in this super wonderful, expansive place, and now there's this problem that we have to deal with. Or another popular example is, when everybody drives in San Diego almost. And so you're driving down the road and then there's somebody blocking the lane and it's causing this big traffic jam. You can't get through and you're like, oh, that jerk. Again, there's this sense of things aren't how we want them to be. And our mind is disturbed. So we've lost that complete sense of expansiveness, and now we're just in that state of, no, this is wrong. When we are being mindful, we actually catch ourselves. We watch the mind, and we see, like, oh, I'm in this state of disturbance. I'm no longer in balance. I'm knocked off balance. And we can put a label on the mind state. That can help. Sometimes it's just minor frustration, irritation. Other times it's like, oh, I feel really sad. Or there's just this sense of annoyance. Or there's full-blown anger and rage. Whatever it is, if we can just label it in that moment, that gives us a little space to work with. Now, all of a sudden, we realize that, oh, there's this awareness that isn't in that mind state. Like, fascinating. But you're probably still caught up in it. So at that point, you're not fascinated yet. So this is why we play mental tennis. So we notice the irritation, the sense of being off balance. And immediately what we do to counteract that is we focus on beauty or gratitude. Beauty or gratitude are everywhere. Like, we can be in the most darkest, deepest pit of despair, and there is a type of beauty there. There is a sense of gratitude. So one thing that you can always rely on to feel gratitude for is just being able to breathe. Because if you're alive, you can breathe. So no matter how horrible things are, if you're breathing, you can feel gratitude for that. Even if you're on a machine, there's gratitude there. So what happens when we shift our focus to either beauty or gratitude, or gratitude for beauty, that works too, is this really fascinating thing happens. Is first there's a tug of war. There's the game of tennis. There's the logical, reasoning mind that has all the lists of why you should remain in this very constricted, off balance, upset place. And then if you go and talk to anybody, they'll all agree with you. They'll say, oh yes, you should be totally pissed. I would be really, I'd just be like, go and punch that guy out. Yeah, I would totally be, miserable. Misery loves company. So you'll get a lot of social support if you go looking for it. If, on the other hand, you say, you know what, I'm just going to be really grateful, that type of social support is a little more harder to find. There's actually a Facebook group called Gratitude, if you ever need one. If you need that outside support. But if you keep playing this game, where it's like you get the lists of reasons, like, no, you should be miserable, and say, well, no, I'm just, for this next couple minutes, I'm going to just keep focusing on gratitude. No, you should really be miserable. No, I'm going to focus on gratitude. And you keep pulling your mind back to gratitude or back to beauty, the actual state of your mind flips. And don't take my word for it. Try it. Try to remember this tennis game the next time you're really off balance, where you're not feeling the expansive beauty and joy of life. If you're just caught in that cycle of misery, that suffering, just keep pushing your mind towards beauty, towards gratitude. You might have to do it 100 times, 1,000 times. But eventually, the hold of that state that has you trapped in suffering will break, and suddenly you'll be in the state of beauty or gratitude. Now, the state of beauty or gratitude, either one, they're very similar. They sit right next to each other on the spectrum. They're very fascinating states to be in because there's not a whole lot to think about. It essentially slows thought down to a crawl. Where when you're in a state of beauty, you're just looking around, you're like, oh wow, there's a beautiful tree, and oh, nice posters, and oh, I love the color of the carpet, and oh, the car in front of me that just cut me off, wow, what a beautiful model car that is. It sounds ridiculous, but it works. And we start to live in this brighter, more open mental space. And when we're there, when the problems come up, we see the emails that are yelling at all these things are blowing up we have to deal with, or we see the pile of dishes that need to be done but we need to run out the door to our appointment. When we're in these states of beauty or gratitude, there are options that we didn't see before. Because when we're off balance, when we're stuck in that misery and that suffering, the only concern is to try and control whatever it is that's making us suffer. And we get locked into that battle of trying to control. And most of the time, we really can't control it. But there are options. There are ways that we can move ourselves. Maybe we realize that, oh, I don't have time to fully wash the dishes, but I can throw them in the sink and put some water on them and they can soak while I'm at work, and then that way they won't be so hard to clean when I get home. There might be all these emails pulling at your attention full of problems, and instead of feeling like you have to try and control all these people that are throwing emails at you, you can budget time and say, you know what, okay, I've got these projects I need to get done, but from 11 to 12, I'm going to go through my emails and catch up with these problems. Where if we're in that state of being off balance, we're just flailing. So ironically, giving up that urge to try and control whatever the problem is by focusing on beauty or gratitude actually gives us this whole other level of control. It opens up all these options that we didn't even occur to us because we were stuck. And so this is this game of tennis that we play. We get knocked off balance, we focus on beauty or gratitude, pull ourselves back up, stay there as long as we can, and then we get knocked off balance again, and then we try to pull ourselves back up. So the real game that we're playing is not trying to stay up all the time. It seems like that would be logical, right? Yes, the goal is to stay up all the time. No, the real goal is how fast can you turn it around when you do get stuck. So the first time you do this, it might take you 20 minutes to pull your mind out of the suffering cycle, or an hour, or a week. Some people get really, really dug in. And then the next time, maybe it takes you half that time, and then half that time. And eventually, if we stay true to the path, if we keep practicing, if we keep doing this over and over again, it becomes instantaneous. It becomes a new mental habit, which feels really weird when you're paying attention. I still remember when I really started practicing this, because throughout this whole cycle is awareness. There's this awareness of all this happening. So when you've played this game enough times, really start to pay attention through all the different steps. And that's when we start to go a little deeper into the practice. But for now, just play this game, see how fast you can flip out of being flipped out. Now, as you're paying attention to this, as you're practicing your mindfulness over the coming weeks and months and years, you'll start to notice patterns. This is where that journal comes in handy. You start to notice that there's certain subjects or certain themes that always catch you. They're like these big potholes in your path. And you're walking along, and even though you know that it's there, you still fall in the pothole. You might even have good friends that like, hey, don't step in the pothole, and boom, you fall and you're on your face. And you do your practice, you get out, but you keep falling in the same pothole. That's where contemplation comes in. The level 1 contemplation, I guess, is we start to notice these habitual patterns. We're like, oh, I got hung up on this before. I'm here again. And the first instinct, of course, is to beat ourselves up. Say, I should know better. Why am I doing this again? Not helpful. So that's another habit that a lot of people have that we also have to overcome. So if you are one of the many people, most people are, who beats themselves up when they recognize that they've made a mistake again, or that they've fallen in the same pothole again, and you get out the self-flagellation stick, be gentle with yourself. Talk nicely to yourself. Congratulate yourself. Say, yes, I figured it out. I'm here again. And again, that sounds ridiculous to do, but it's so powerful because it breaks that habit of beating ourselves up. Say, no, this is a really good thing that I've realized that I'm here again. Then take a little piece of paper and write down the theme of what it is that pothole is that represents. As concisely as you can. Write it down. Then I find people do better if they meditate first, but you don't have to. But what you're going to do is when you have time, you're going to set a timer for whether it's 5 minutes, 10 minutes, 20 minutes, whatever, however long it's going to be, but it's important to set a timer. You're going to take that little piece of paper and you're going to allow yourself to think about that issue and only that issue. You're going to contemplate, what is this about? How is this working in my life? Don't go to why. You'll want to go to why, and then you'll come up with all sorts of stories and information about why this has occurred to me, and it's family drama, and I learned this from my Uncle Joe and Auntie Sue, and that's why this happens to me. And that doesn't matter. The story, completely irrelevant. And I'm sorry your ego doesn't want to hear that. Because our egos love stories. Stories are great, but save them for the movies, save them for the TV shows. But when we contemplate, we want to take a more scientific approach. We want to look at what is actually happening when I fall in that pothole. How is it working? How am I falling into the pothole? What is this issue really about? And that's the train of thought that we want to have when we're contemplating. What is it? How does it work? And what's underneath it? Because most often, whatever you think the issue is, whatever you wrote on that piece of paper, it's hiding something. There's something deeper. And that's why we want to contemplate it. That's why we want to dig through those layers and say, what is really behind it? And as we dig through, we'll eventually find the actual attachment, the actual thing that we're trying to control, the thing that we think is how life should be or how we think we should be, and we're not. And that's what we're actually getting hung up on. And when we bring the light of awareness to that actual issue, again, it's magic. It dissolves. It's like we take the power it has over us and we pull the plug, and it gets really, really small. And all of a sudden, it's not that big of a deal. But we have to be willing to put our full attention on the actual issue. So you can think of it as if you have a rock in your shoe. You can have be walking around, and then every so often it rolls to just the right spot, and it's like, ow! You have the pain and the annoyance and the anger, and we know, like, oh, there's something in my shoe, but oh, I'm too busy, I can't deal with it. Can't deal with it. So actually sitting down and taking off our shoe and actually digging through it and finding that rock and pulling it out, that's contemplation. That's what we're doing. What most people do is they kind of just shake their foot and make the rock roll down to the toe, and then you keep walking, right? I think we've all done that. And so I want to encourage you to actually do the contemplation, but the timer is important, because the habit that most people have is they'll start to, if you don't use a timer and you say, okay, I'm going to contemplate this issue, instead of actually contemplating and really digging deep and, sitting there and taking off the shoe and actually digging out the rock, what people do is they kind of think about it a little bit and then they go about their day, and they'll think about it a little bit more and they'll go about their day, and then it turns into this indulgence where it's like, oh, I kind of want it. It's this sickness that people have. It's like, oh, I feel a little off, so I'm going to be just indulge in this thing that I know is an issue, and that way I know why I feel miserable. See how weird brains are, how weird our mind is? Because that's a type of control. It's like I feel off and I'm miserable, so I'm going to like just blame it on this issue that I'm not dealing with. And blame it on the rock in my shoe. And people go on for years and years and years like that. Get a big old sore on their foot and have all sorts of problems in their life and not be able to function very well. So instead, when you notice one of these themes that we recognize through our mindfulness practice, take the time, set the timer, dig through. When the timer goes off, even if you haven't found resolution, then stop. Focus on something else. Something, again, move your mind to beauty or gratitude. Go work on a project that you enjoy. Go watch your favorite TV show. Something to shift the mind out of that. And then make an appointment with yourself to go contemplate it again. And you do that as many times as it takes to unearth that attachment. And when we do these practices, when we meditate every day, twice a day is better, because if we do the evening meditation, it's a really nice way to kind of slough off any incorrect ideas that we picked up throughout the day. And it really helps create that baseline incline, because otherwise, we're going at half the speed. So if you really want to excel, meditate in the morning, meditate in the evening, in between, practice mindfulness, and then when you need to, contemplate what those potholes are, those repetitive situations or themes where you get caught in misery. And this way, we stay true to our path and we just keep returning to it no matter what. That's the hard part, is because, like I said, we reach a certain point where we feel like, oh, life is pretty good. I've got everything I want that's going on. And I just want to enjoy. And then now I'm too busy to meditate. Oh, I forget about this mindfulness stuff. And then we fall off the path. So if that happens, just very gently bring yourself back to the meditation cushion and start over. It's that simple. So let's meditate.